much for being here. Here we go. Thank you for being here. We're going to have a conversation about designing for equity in education. I'll be moderating the conversation. My name is Kaleena Sales again, a design educator and chair of the Department of Art and Design. And we have an amazing panel for you today. We'll begin by the panelists introducing themselves and their work, and then we'll transition into questions and hopefully have an engaging conversation. And we'll reserve some time at the end for questions from you all. So thank you again for being here. Let's jump into introduction. So Milan, thank you.
Peace, everybody. I don't know what you see. I'm going to click something and see what happens. We're all going to see what happens together. Oh, that is me. You see my name over there in the corner. Okay. Well, at any rate, I'm clicking. I'm going to push another clicker. Did something happen? This mic is off. I turned it off. Now it's on. I'm going to turn it back off. Okay. I'm just going to have to give y'all the Barry White, you feel me? If I talk low, it don't get no chaos. But if I keep it like this, everybody's good. All right, so I'm still clicking, not worried about the... Okay, you got something. Okay, so my name is Milan Drake. I gave my introduction this morning in my session. The best way to describe me is Tommy Earl Drake and Sandra Drake's oldest boy. That's pretty much the most important thing about me. I do design things. I do dope stuff. This is me doing dope stuff with Derica Wilson, Natalie Wilson, Alita Hayes, and Felicia Smith. I did a live podcast at Stanford d.School. But I want to also talk about me and bringing education, music, design all into one space. And then this is a work I have, these zines from my class that I taught at the d.School. So I'm trying to be moving expeditiously. I just rushed. I didn't say, at a minimum, I'm a lecturer, community design lead at Stanford University. I hate the titles, but just so y'all know who I am. The clicker works, so that's all. I'm gonna let you use your mic.
All right, we're gonna jump to Ritesh next. Thank you, Milan.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so my focus right now is the 4 C's: community, care, confidence, and cash. So within those 4, I am the founder and CEO of d.School. We are the world's first online pay-what-you-can design school for creatives of color. Thank you. The way our program works is each of our cohorts are about 12 weeks long, and each week we meet in the evenings on Zoom, and they feel a little bit more like a Twitch stream than they do like a typical lecture. First hour, the students are typically hearing from a speaker, so we typically have at least 12 speakers, 1 per week. And then the second hour is with me, and I usually act as the facilitator to moderate person-to-person discussions and critiques, as well as Q&As. But really quickly, can we just really quickly poll the room? How many of y'all, and you can vote more than once, are educators? Okay, so for the people on the stream that can't see, that's about half the room. How about designers? And I'm using that term very broadly. Okay, that's about 100%, okay? How about administrators? All right, we got 2 of y'all, 3 of y'all, okay, great. And then how many folks are in the DE&I justice and belonging space? Okay, about 10, okay. Any others? Students? I'm using that term very, very, very broadly. Great, any others? Researchers, entrepreneurs. Great. Okay. Well, I'm going to focus on certain questions and not focus on others then. I love this.
Thank you, Ritesh. We're going to move to Tracey next.
Hello, I'm Tracey Moore. I'm the interim director for the art program at Prairie View A&M University. I'm a designer as well. Some of the work here, I do most of the marketing materials for our African American History Month activities. So these are just some of the posters and work that I've done in that. I do have some student work. My passion in education is really trying to use design as a form of historic preservation. So a lot of the student work, we do work with other organizations and entities like this particular project. The students were rebranding one of our culture centers as it was supposed to be phasing into a museum, but COVID. And some of the work, we do a little bit of design activism. This is a piece where the students were educating fellow students about past voter suppression methods used against our people. And the second poster was informational about how to correctly fill out the voter registration card in terms of the mailing and residential addresses. That's been a sticking point with our student body at Prairie View. So yeah, my most current project, I'm working with a student undergraduate researcher, Corey Minor. He's in the audience. And we're working to create this interactive experience to bring the very first principal of Prairie View. We have principals before presidents because our president was the president of Texas A&M. So he's creating a 3D model of the president based on the one photograph that we have of him. And and I'm doing the background research on Principal Minor's life and times. And again, most of the work I have my students do has to do with historic preservation. So this project you see is called the History Box. And so my students have to research a prominent African American figure in Texas. Either they were born in Texas or had a huge impact in Texas and on our university. So that is it. That's the work.
Thank you, Tracey, and we'll move on to P.
Peace, y'all. Whoa. Sometimes the energy be like that. My name is Marshall Pollard.
It's too close, yeah. There we go. Thank you.
Is this good? There we go. How y'all feeling? Good, good. My name is Marshall Pollard. Young people call me Mr. P. All my homies call me P. You can call me P. I'm the founder and executive director of the Creative School. We're a model for how young people on the south side of DC design businesses for their community based on the stories of their people. And so if you could do me a big favor, if everybody can repeat after me, story-centered design. I'm trying to make that a household name in the hood. So I believe that young people are the greatest among us. I believe that they are the ones that will lead us to the redesign that is required. So we're starting a design school in Southeast DC. Story-centered design has 3 phases. The first phase is an invitation. We're gonna use story as the fuel for design. In our neighborhood, you can't just pull up and start having cameras and microphones. So we have a fresh pressed juice brand that our young people run called Southside Drip. Everybody say Southside. So our young people cut the vegetables, the juice, they press it, they label the bottles, and they pass it out for free in exchange for an interview. This is where I get my clicker. We have a podcast called The Kids Can Be a Big Podcast. You can scan that QR code and listen to our most recent episode. Every time we pass out a bottle of drip, somebody gives us a written interview or an oral interview, interviewed by our queens and kings, in order to design solutions, scalable businesses for our community. We're not an incubator, but we are a design school, and we are making sure that that's status quo
in the world's most powerful city, a city that is designed to create inequitable access to generational health and wealth in the world's most powerful city. It's a setup. I think everybody in this room knows that. So it's my life's work to make health and wealth by design, led by the greatest among us.
Thank you, thank you. You can keep the mic. My first question's for you.
Oh, hey.
All right. So I want to ask you, based on the work that you do, what does an ideal, equitable future in design education look like to you? And what steps do you believe we need to take to get there?
For sure. I think, did you all know that it will take black folks 228 years to accumulate the same amount of wealth as white families? If they stopped working, right? 228 years. So for some reason, I'll speak about my community, less than 40% of the queens and kings that I work with graduate from DC public schools. 1 in 11 who do graduate go on to earn a 4-year degree. The median income in my neighborhood is $38,000, and the median income in the city is $120, right? So if we're not thinking about the day-to-day lived experiences of young people to change that reality, like, they don't care. They don't care about A's and B's and degrees that, even for those that get those pieces of paper, do not change their lived reality. So I think in order to have an equitable educational experience for young people, I think step one is we all have to agree and make it not something that is fought over politically, that redesign is required, right? Like, I talk to my council members, they want new charter schools and new public schools. They don't want a design school. They don't want young people waking up and doing this redesign work that is required. So I think step one, if we're actually going to design an equitable future for education, we have to all agree and make it status quo that the current design is doing exactly what it is supposed to do, and redesign is required, right? And if we can get past that step, which I think, like, some of my life's work is to maybe make it status quo to, like, that redesign is required. If we can get there, though, I believe that the next step is to question who gets to be the designer, right? Right now, we sit in a lot of rooms. I'm so glad that there's many students in this room. If we're talking about education, young people should be in the room. There's too many rooms where design decisions are made about policy, about how schools are run, that have no young people in them. So I believe that young people should be in the room as we lead efforts towards redesign. And I happen to believe that story-centered design can be that process that young people then get to use. Story-centered design is not for adults. It is not for people that are outside of 14 to 24 to be the designers of. They can participate, but this design framework that I believe is a possibility for getting to an equitable education for our young people has to be led by them.
Thank you. And I guess to follow up on that, if we think about how to get young people in the room, my next question would be for Milan. How do you think the representation of Black designers in education influences the aspirations and confidence of Black students?
Thank you. So I'm speaking of household names. I'm trying to create a conversation around Black thought as design, as a design pedagogy. So work at the D.School, working on PhDs. I guess I'm bored. I don't know what's going on with my life. But I'm trying to figure out how do we create spaces for what I call, so that image I showed you of Derrica Wilson. So there's an HBO documentary called Black and Missing. I don't know if you've heard of it or seen it, but Derrica Wilson, Natalie Wilson are the founders of Black and Missing Foundation. And they talk about conversations of Black folks going missing and it not making the news, not being on social media or what have you. So that podcast was I was hosting the conversation around invisible designers. The fact that Black folks are contributors to design thinking, to design spaces, people like Tracey, people like P, people like Ritesh who are doing this work, and they're not, as P is saying, household names. Changing that has to be with us. And so I led that conversation, brought them all the way from the East Coast and said, you need to sit on this red couch at Stanford and talk about what it is you do. I'm going to force your conversation into the space. And that Black Thought as Design is me thinking of how do we shift who we even call designers? What do we even call design thinking? I've had the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Angela Davis, had Ahmad Akintunde, and like looking at people who are not considered designers, but also bringing them into the space, and that takes us to be able to do that. And I think just lastly, on the last note is figuring out ways how to do that and then share that information as well. Sister Dawn from Kent State, somewhere out there, we were talking about the first panel I led this morning. If you made a mixtape, raise your hand. If you had the pleasure of making mixtapes, there's a lot of people in here they got 101. There's a lot of stuff out here. It's exclusive stuff that they got. But she holding it up. See, it's exclusive. Everybody ain't got that. You know what I mean? That's Black Thought right there in the making. But the idea of like, how do I bring that into these spaces and then engage with folks and show them not only what I do, but how to do it. Classes I've taught, giving forth information, figuring out a shift in the centering of, I don't want to use the word not centering whiteness, but really focusing on things that are most interested to our students, to our faculty, and to our community. I don't know if anyone else wants to share. I know you definitely do a lot of that work. But yes, and no pressure. You don't have to comment. I'm just giving you your mic back.
So the question was about representation of Black designers in education and how do we build up the confidence and aspirations of Black students?
I'm thinking about what I do in the classroom. We require all of our students to take an African American art class. Mm-hmm. So we talk a lot about, the artists, the designers, their lives, the social, political environment that they live in. But speaking on the actual work the students do, I don't know, they'll tell you we're black over here. So like everything, I started changing things based on, before I would have the status quo, like design projects. But once I was asked to join the committee to develop our African American Studies program, the conversation that we had was, how do we infuse this into everything that we teach here? And so that started changing in me, like some of the projects, like we focus on history and kind of designing that history and what that looks like now, and how can we deliver this information about our people and who we are to the next generation, the next audience. So we have the history box. The students now, a couple of them are in here, they're working on a project I call the movie before the movie, where we're looking at African American filmmakers and pioneers. So I try to steer them away from the current people. Like, you can't pick anybody from 1995 to now. We look at the older people and reimagine what their movie trailer or the movie title sequence would be in this day and context. So they have to research the designer, research the producer, look at the film, if there's a film, or look at pieces of the film. So it's just like finding ways to amplify this so that students, especially my students, I want them to get a good sense of who they are, who we are, where we came from, what we've been through. And in a place like Prairie View, it's so rich with history because we're a school that the state of Texas, if they wanted to deal with black people, or they didn't want to deal with black people, they sent them to Prairie View for everything. We have extension offices, we had sports leagues, everything centered around Black Texas, centered at Prairie View. So it's important for me to focus on that and that be our foundation.
Can I expand on that real quick? So something that we started doing, and that's been part of every cohort, has been, do y'all hear it?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so where was I? First week, and I want to expand on something that you just mentioned. First week of each of our cohorts is around understanding your design self and having each person think about how far they can go to find the influences that they have on their work. So asking about who their parents are inspired by, or any other guardians, how far back they can go in their design journey can help them understand a little bit around themselves a little bit more, build confidence, and then also work within the framework that we typically practice around decolonialization and divestment. So I want to see more schools, including my former school, UCLA, where I graduated from. I have mixed feelings about that. I don't want to go on record for that one, but come talk to me after that. But I wish more curricula at universities and education in general started with the sense of self first, before starting to teach about others.
So as a follow-up, I guess, and it sort of shifts gears a little bit, but I think it relates to what you just said. What role do you believe empathy and understanding play in creating a more equitable education environment?
Are you all ready for this? Okay, so I think design empathy is BS.
Okay.
I think it's a term that's been weaponized by white-led agencies to make them feel better about getting clients that they shouldn't be working on. It's design tourism, okay? It's taking a photo, leaving without showing the photo to the person you took a photo of. Designers are often told that we can use human-centered design. And if we do that, we can conquer anything. But it's a problematic point of view, right? The best design happens, or some of the best design happens, when you're part of the community that's actually going to be impacted by the actual work that you're designing. And there's a lot of head nods because you're probably part of that already. But that's not design empathy, that's compassion. There's an indigenous scholar, Dr. Eve Tuck. Does anybody know their work? Dr. Tuck urges us to reconsider the, quote, long-term impact of damage-centered research and approaches, end quote. And there's a great piece that they've written if you just type in Dr. Eve Tuck, damage-centered approaches. And my interpretation of some of it is, instead of thinking of ourselves as broken, and she talks about this too, reframe design and establish community ethics. It's also what she talks about, and so much more. But the way I think about it is not using the term human-centered design anymore. It's too rigid of a process. It centers whiteness, and it also centers neurotypical ways of working. Okay? And when you center humans in the design process, you forget about non-human objects, our environment, and also, in my opinion, communities at large. So ironically, this term human-centered design, in my opinion, is dehumanizing. And if someone wants to pay Useful School or any of us to come up with a better term, we'll happily take that money. I like the story-centered approach a lot. I think that's much, much stronger than human-centered design. So I think overall we need to rethink how we do our design process. Oftentimes when I'm working with clients, most of the time we are actually employing our actual graduates of our program to actually be on those projects. And we give our clients a pretty long timeline because we don't know when inspiration is going to strike. It's really difficult coming from the agency world that I was part of. I was part of White and Kennedy and a variety of other places. It's really hard to work in a really rushed environment when you're not able to go out into the world and experience the actual work that you might be creating. And oftentimes a lot of work comes in the 11th hour. And so as a neurodivergent person, I I can brainstorm super well. I'm not gonna swear, because, okay, we talked about that, the guidelines of that. But I can brainstorm really well, okay? But other people can't brainstorm that well, right? So when we're talking about community-centered design, story-led design, et cetera, we need to make sure that every process across the design is working for everybody, right? So instead of having only group brainstorm sessions, make sure that there's neurodivergent people that can be part of that. Maybe they need to do something asynchronously, right? When we do design critiques, inclusive design critiques, we actually did a workshop for an agency around inclusive design critiques. Thinking about doing an inclusive design critique is really, really difficult when the design critique is 12 people all in a room and just tearing apart a person's work. It's very difficult for that person who might need a little bit more care and understanding. And I think it's also very important that the people who want support and are neurodivergent, they're encouraged by their companies to voice what support that they need, so that way they can understand what support they need to give, and also make sure that employees who are neurodivergent and leaders who are neurodivergent are treating their neurodivergence as a blessing and not a hindrance. So that's my take on design empathy.
Thank you. Did anyone have any thoughts on that or want to add anything before I move on?
Just wanted to also comment on, we had and Don, I mentioned you while you were gone, just so you know. I mentioned your name in a positive light. I did. No, it was. I was shouting you out. I just wanted to, let you know I was shouting you out. Very brilliant sister, Dawn. One of the things we did in the class I teach at the D.School called Print on Purpose, we had to teach students the difference between critique and preference. And so when someone says, we're working on a project and you're like, I didn't like when you used that brown, it's like, that's not critique. Critique is asking, like, what was the message you were going for? Well, I wanted people to see the microphone. Well, maybe if you put the microphone on the other side of the table, it probably shows up a little better, versus, yeah, I don't think you should put a microphone on there. You should put like flowers. And understanding that critique, how to even critique someone's work takes time. So the discovery of like, what project are we gonna work on? It takes time. You can't just 2 to 3 weeks give me a deliverable. That's not how it works. I gotta figure out what are you really trying to do? Like, it might take me 11 questions, like, oh, that's what you, okay, so now we need to go a completely different way. So just, when you just use that word critique, that just also, it just popped into my head about how we don't really have moments to teach how to critique. We think critiquing is giving your opinion, your thoughts, and oh, it made me feel. Like, nah, that's not, if I wanted the shirt to do this, am I doing it or not? Yes, you are. Or you could probably change the color so I can see the letters a little better. Just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. The next question is for Tracey, actually, and she says, oh no. It actually goes back to a point I think you were making about the authentic relationships, right? Sort of that authenticity. So the question is, how can collaborations between design schools and communities of color be fostered to ensure that education is not only accessible, but also relevant and empowering?
For the last couple of years, I've been on this grant project with some colleagues from our sister schools, Texas A&M, and we've worked with a school district in Texas that's about 4 hours away from us. But we work with what they dubbed underrepresented students. And so our project centered around introducing, well, in the grant we called it visual computing, but it really was like game design, doing kind of the front end, the character design, environment design, level design, all of that. And we started working with middle schoolers and some as young as elementary. And we worked with Gearbox on this project as well. So, and the thought behind it was, if we introduce this to students of color, our black and brown students, then hopefully when they matriculate through high school and they're still working in this game development, they can either go straight into working at a game design company or go to college for this, because I think, what did you say, Jacinda, was 5.4% of interior designers who are black? For game designers, I think it's less than 3%. So the idea behind that project was to start early. My contribution to it, because the question came up, okay, what do we get for these students to stay? Because right now they're seeing game design as kind of a hobby. And my contribution, well, in my years of education, is you gotta educate the parents. Because that's one of the first things a parent will say, and I hate to say this, especially a black parents, like, you can't make money with art. I think I heard somebody say that today in a conversation. It's a young lady from Santa Monica College, there we go. And I've heard that like my whole life, I'm an artist. But I think because we have a lot of artists in my family, it wasn't so much of a bad thing, but I've heard it a lot. And you know, the question that was asked to me, well, do you have data on that? I was like, well, 47 years of life experience, but I will find you the research that supports what I'm saying. And so like what came out of that was kind of a collaboration where we hosted a game fest at the ISD. We had panels and speakers from different game companies, game artists, who talked to parents. The students did their own showcase so they could show their parents and grandparents what they're doing, what they're working on. And we had our college students, we had about 5 undergraduate and graduate researchers on this project with us. They served as mentors to the middle schoolers. And so it was a really successful event. We had about 250 people come. And it was great to see parents and grandparents like, oh wow, like look at what you can do. So, and I think one of my first experiences with working with the young was with Jacinda in Las Vegas at an AIGA conference. We did a design thinking workshop, design challenge, there you go. That was so much fun. But I think we have to start early. And it's not only showing students what they can do, it's showing their parents and their guardians that this is viable and this is something and they can make a life out of this. Yeah.
And shout out to Jacinda Walker and Design Explorer. All right, so we're having conversations about, representation in design and lack of diversity in design. And so, we all, I think, agree that it's important for more Black students and just people of color in general to navigate their way into these fields. So my question is for P. What emotional and psychological impacts do you see a lack of equity having on Black students pursuing design, and how can we address that?
For sure. I want to start by saying I know I'm speaking about the community that I practice in. I recognize that my community, there might be connections to yours. For Black and brown students, it may not be the exact same, but I do just want to say I'm speaking to this answer from what it's like to be in Southeast DC. I think that to live in a city that, as I mentioned earlier, has both health and wealth by design, being inaccessible by the native people from that community. Like, that is not by accident, right? So what is it like to be a young person who is growing up in that design? What is it like to have, in the past 6 years, I've buried 6 students. So what is it like to be a young person who walks around with a list of people that you've lost? What is it like we had one of our young people, a lot of people ask us, why do y'all pass out the juice? Why do you collect the stories? Why do you come up with businesses? Why stories? Why juice? We live in a city with 700,000 people and 52 grocery stores, which is about 8 per ward. right? There's 8 different wards in DC. In Ward 8, where we do our work, there's 1 grocery store. And Devon, one of the leaders of our programs, he was greeting our community at a community health day. He was explaining story-centered design. And the way that he did it, he said, raise your hand if you know what it's like on the 1st and the 15th at Giant, when you go to the water aisle, right? There's no water there, right? So the 1 grocery store that we have, right when we have the access to get fresh water, because they tell you, do not drink the tap in DC, right? So to go be healthy, there is not access. To bury your friends like it's normal, right? To have some pride to walk into school with an RIP shirt on, right? That is a part of what it's like to grow up. And if it's anything like that in my community, I bet it's somewhat like that in yours, because this design of how our communities have been created is not by accident, the isolation of people. So I believe that young people are walking into schools, the options that they have available for them, and they are not set up to deal with the trauma that our people are experiencing. This is crazy, y'all. Like, we live in a country where health is not accessible. Not just wealth, but health is not accessible. So I think in terms of, I say all this because I believe there is an urgency that we have to operate under. We have to recognize that young people today are experiencing the ramifications of inequitable access to health and wealth, and that they walk around in bodies that are experiencing that on a day, and it is a new normal. It is a new normal to walk around feeling and experiencing the impact of the design around us. So I think one of those steps of addressing some of those barriers is by creating spaces of healing. A big part of our work is routine, right? In your folders, in the bags that you got today, there's a flyer that has a QR code on the back. It says, show up, stick around, stay connected. I'm gonna ask everybody to say that with me. Show up, stick around, stay connected. So as young people are experiencing the inequity of the design they inherited, and as for our young people, as they are redesigning access to health and wealth, I believe it is a requirement for the village to be present consistently over time, right? One of the young people at one of our community health days, he looked at a network member, and he said he hadn't seen this person in a while. And he said, hey, Brooks, where you been? Right? He knew this person by name. He knew that this person wasn't around recently, right? And so I believe to address the emotional and psychological impacts of the design that our young people inherited, we have to figure out ways to do life with them, to design our way out of this. And so I mentioned the flyer that's in your folder. I realized I didn't tell you what to do with it. You should join the network. You should join the Easy 123 Coalition. I don't care where you're from. If you're not from DC, you should be connected to Queens and Kings on the South Side, who are designing a new school model. We believe that anybody can be a network member if you believe in the power of Queens and Kings and you want to show up, stick around, stay connected. So do that with my Queens and Kings. Maybe do that with the Queens and Kings that are in your community, so that we can address the psychological, emotional impact.
Thank you. I think we have just about 5 or so minutes left. We have a lot more that we could talk about, but I'd love to open it up to the audience. If there's anyone that has a question, please, yeah. Were you about to raise your hand? Yeah. Oh my gosh, you're asking how you can help teachers educate? Anyone want to answer that?
First of all, we don't hear that question very often. We're thrown off here. What do we do? I would say, you know, I have the honor of having 3 students with me, Amira, Michael, and Imgard from Stanford, and I think having you be in the spaces when you hear us we got to pass out flyers, we're trying to host events. Tell your friends, just like you pull up for the kickback and you pull up for this, my professor got this event, I know, but just come through. We love seeing, and I think I can speak, we love to see one student show up with 4. Like, I brought 3, like, wait, what? You brought people? Whatever it takes. I mean, for me, that was the biggest thing, because a lot of these events, like State of Black Design, I'm doing events at Stanford, similar to what you were talking about, P, called trying to break the rebirth of conversations, and just bring students back into the spaces. When you do get a couple of dollars, if you don't show up, those dollars get snatched. They're like, well, we tried, nobody came. So I would say for me, showing up, bringing a friend, and sacrificing some time with these students. I mean, it's finals week, and all 3 of these students are here. They were struggling, but they said, I gotta pull up. So, being present for us is an extreme helpful venture, to start the process of showing up for us.
I wanted to add to that. I would love to reframe where the money goes to who gets compensated for creating curriculum. I would love to pay who would be considered students. I would love to pay folks to design the curriculum for Useful School. And I want other places to do that too. I think there's a lot of things that are problematic that happen when academics are creating curriculum only. I think we should be doing it in tandem. So I think that is one way I think individuals like yourself and others can help steward some of the work that's up here, as well as some other places. I want to give a shout out to like d.School, Marcy Lab School, a variety of other places I think should be receiving more, not only investment, but also support in a variety of ways.
It's a great question. I think educators have been trying to solve that for a minute. Especially the answer is difficult in contexts where the resource of time is very limited, right? So I think starting with that context of how do we create spaces for the people who are most directly connected to the young people we're trying to build, right? And then if we answer the question on who those people are, which many of them are their family members, but also, their coaches, their mentors, their aunties, people who are in their lives. So then what type of space would they want to show up to? Do they want to show up to that same PTA meeting that doesn't serve them, and it's just that one parent complaining again and again? So thinking about how you design with the space that they are invited to. In my work, I consider myself a network organizer. I care a lot about the power of a circle, what happens when people sit in it, what are the routines and the rituals that happen once you sit in that circle. And in our work, we have every month there's a dinner for the adults who are trying to show up in the community and in the programs with our young people. This has nothing to do with story-centered design. We are not interviewing the adults. We are creating a space where they get dinner. They can bring their kids. It's somewhat like babysitting, right? They get to be aware of all the resources that are available to them. It's not just about the creative school, which I would love for them to be hip to everything that we're doing, but they might need something that we're not offering, right? And so if I can create a space that is every month, third Thursday of every month, the Congress Heights Arts and Culture Center, they know that it's there, they can get free food, it's gonna be a good time, get connection. So just think about when it comes to getting parents involved or any stakeholder involved, what type of space do they yearn for that they don't currently have? And how do you provide that space so that it can get you the relationship and take care of some of that need of community, so that once they're in the community, now you can try to get them hip to everything that the school is doing or to your initiative or your program. But just design with them in mind. What type of space do they need to have that they currently don't have access to, and try to create that space alongside them. Get some parents to design that dinner or that meeting with you, and so that it reflects their identity. Great question.
I know there's several hands going up. I'm so sorry. We're actually at time. And just for the sake of sort of making sure that we're respecting the schedule, I will end our panel there. But I do want to thank Ritesh and P and Tracey and Milan for contributing to this conversation, and for the work that you all are doing. It's important work. Please follow them, follow their work, follow their journeys, I guess you all are probably on social media. If you want to share where they can find you, that'd be great.
Sure. So you can follow the Queens and Kings of the Creative School at thecreative.school. That's our Instagram, that's our website. Also, you can follow me, _MR_P, so 2 underscores Mr.P. I do not use social media like that, but I do have a blog, and I do try to write all the things that I'm seeing and learning and feeling, so you can follow that too. But definitely follow the Queens and Kings at thecreative.school.
LinkedIn. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn, and if I could be useful in any sort of way. I would also like to say, I was thinking about creating a contact list for people who want to opt in to help connect with each other. So does anybody want to be part of that? Okay. I think those are conversations we can facilitate, so maybe I'll work with Omari, and I were talking about that last night, so maybe we'll launch that at some point.
Awesome.
Okay, you can find me on LinkedIn, Tracey Elmore, and our students have an Instagram. It's Studio 317. And I don't remember if you type out the 3 or you type out the 17. Okay, thank you. Type out the 3. Studio 317.
And I'm also on LinkedIn, Milan, Milan Drake. Social media, The Mind of Milan. All of them. I'm like P. I'm not on there, but I'm working on it. And I will be here passing out things to give away. I brought a lot of stuff, and I don't want to go back with it. So find me, see me. It's gonna be the brother with the dopest hat. Second dopest hat in the building. Second dopest hat. But
shout out Michael.
Shout out Michael. I'm only taking second place because he's got a gallery and all type of stuff. He's free food, and I can't compete with that. But my hat is still dope. There's only one of these in here. So find me, and we can make magic happen.
Real quick,
real quick, sorry. Listen to our podcast that is fully produced by the Queens and Kings of the Creative School. Kids Can Be Big. You can find it on wherever you get your podcast. Kids Can Be Big podcast. Season 2 is about to drop. They're coming up with businesses for students, teachers, and parents who have been impacted by COVID, which is everybody. So check out the last season about how we keep us safe. Next season about life after pandemic.
We shouting out podcasts? Hip Hop Roundtable, you know what I'm saying? I do a podcast. If y'all want to get on there and hear me argue about hip hop, I do that. Do that with Landon Hill, Devin Howard.
Do your thing.
That's it. I'm just saying. I didn't know he was doing that. I got podcasts. I didn't know. Ritesh got one.
I want to shout out one of my favorite podcasts, Maurice Cherry's Revision Path.
He got fans. You got a podcast?
Yeah.
Tracey about to start a podcast today, episode 1, State of Black Design. Watch it, tune in.
Yeah, and I'll just
you got a podcast?
No. Well, shout out to Maurice Cherry. I think Revision Path just announced that it's ending, but he's done incredible work in that space, and so I want to clap it up for him real quick as well. All right, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you all.
All right, we're really close to break, but we got one more thing before we go. A fun cipher. Amari's going to explain it to us. Please, you do not want to miss this. Amari, where are you?